In this true story, you'll discover the harrowing journey of a man who found himself trapped in the grip of slavery in Saudi Arabia. So, let's begin. This story is about Abdul Rahim, who lived in a small village of Kashmir, Pakistan. In 1990, Abdul was about 30 years old and was happily married. He worked as a stonemason building houses and doing other labor jobs in the village. Hard labor and remote village life made him strong and fit. One day Abdul was told that there are some job vacancies in Saudi Arabia, advertised by an agent in the nearest city. He traveled to the city and met with the recruitment agent, who told him that the cost for this visa is higher than usual because the job is for working within a shop. Because of the harsh hot weather in Saudi Arabia, the indoor jobs are preferred by workers. He will be given a one-year contract which can be renewed every year. They agreed on the fee for the agent, and Abdul returned home to get his documents ready to apply for the visa. While his visa was under process, his wife told him that she is expecting, and it was a joyful moment for both. A few days later, Abdul got a message from the recruitment agent that his visa has been approved and he should pack his things as the flight to Saudi Arabia is in 2 weeks' time. Abdul and his wife shared the news with their families and friends. Everyone was excited to hear about the departure of Abdul for a better future. When the day arrived, Abdul said goodbye and got on the plane. The plane landed in Jeddah and he was welcomed by a Pakistani guy who was working as an agent for a Saudi employer. He spoke good Arabic and was able to communicate between Abdul and the Saudi employer. The agent introduced him to Saudi employer. Around this time, they took his passport to keep on record. In Saudi Arabia, an employer or sponsor is known as kafil, who has the responsibility of care for the people working for him. Abdul was told that his Saudi kafil will take him to his store where he will be trained. Communication in the store will not be an issue as there are other Pakistani and Indian workers who can assist him and provide him training. Abdul was picked up by the Saudi kafil. They started traveling away from Jeddah city out on the motorway. After about an hour, the 4x4 SUV took a turn off the road onto the sand. This made Abdul a bit confused. The SUV kept going over dunes and sand tracks, and Abdul, unable to speak Arabic, was unsure how to ask where they are going. After about 40 minutes of driving through the desert, they arrived at a group of tents where camels and goats were tied to one side. His kafil told to unload his belongings and follow him, making a hand gesture. He took Abdul to a small room on the side of all the tents and told him to sit there. Abdul was given food and slept in the tent, but he kept thinking that this could not be the place where he would be working. Next day he was woken up and given some camel milk to drink for his breakfast. Then his kafil opened up the gate which kept the goats and gave a stick to take the goats out. He was given a bag with some bread and cheese and water bottle with just about 3 glasses of water. Abdul was in a shock and showed his disapproval of the situation, started to explain with his hand gestures that this is not what he was told. The Saudi kafil started to become agitated and aggressive, but told Abdul to go if he wants to leave. Abdul packed his bag quickly and got out and asked to take him back to the city, but his employer declined, so he started to walk towards the direction where he come from to get to the main road. After an hour and a half walking in the desert, Abdul realized that he is lost as every dune looked the same and he had no sense of direction. As the sun was rising and the temperature got hotter, Abdul didn't know where to go. Then he heard noise of a car engine, and as he looked back, he saw the SUV of his kafil. He approached Abdul in an aggressive manner, and took out his gun to shoot him. Abdul got scared and begged him not to shoot him. To Abdul it felt like that he will shoot him and bury him in the sand and no one will know what happened to him. His kafil ordered him to get back into the SUV, and drove him back to the tents. He handed over the goats and told him to take them away in the desert so they can feed on the thorny bushes. Abdul spent the whole day wandering with the goats up and down the dunes and kept thinking what has just happened to him. Is he going to get back to the job he was promised, and if he will get out of this desert alive? The sun was strong and Abdul started to keep himself covered to avoid sunburn. He panicked as the goats wandered out and were unable to control. After some time running after the goats, Abdul realized that he has lost the location of the tents and doesn't have a sense of direction. He was surrounded by the dunes and rocks and got exhausted trying to find his way back. As the evening arrived, the goats started walking and Abdul followed them, and to his surprise, they brought him back to the tents. Abdul locked them into their pen and went back to his tent to rest. This made him realize that these goats know the way back and they will always return home in the evening. The Saudi kafil had multiple wives and it was their job to milk the camels and goats to prepare the meal. Abdul was given the meal to eat with milk and was told to rest. His kafil always wore the belt which had a knife on one side and a gun on the other side. Days went past and Abdul started to get into this routine. At the end of the month Abdul asked his employer to pay him his salary, and was told that there is no salary. Either he works here or he will be shot dead and buried in the desert. Abdul realized that he is no longer an employee, and become a slave. He thought about his family back home and kept thinking how he can make his way back. Following the same routine, Abdul, now a slave and into forced labor, started to follow the routine and noticed that the Saudi kafil left the nomadic tents to drive to the city to get supplies and water. Abdul kept an eye on the direction kafil used to go to get supplies and thought to himself that maybe he can follow the same direction. Months passed and one day Abdul was out in the desert, and to protect himself from the sun he lied down next to a small tree but unfortunately fell asleep. When he woke up, he realized that the goats are no longer with him and he ran frantically to find them and climbed dunes and rocks. His fear was that he might be lost and would never be able to get back to the tents. Staying alive in the desert without any water is impossible. He thought of his pregnant wife and other family members back home. He calmed himself and started to look for the footsteps, and after some time Abdul managed to find the goats. He felt a sense of relief that he can finally get back and keep on going, so one day he might be able to reunite with his family. As time passed, Abdul's hair and beard grew longer, his clothes were worn out and his shoes were torn. He asked his kafil to provide him replacement but he declined. Abdul carried on working with barefoot and his feet would get swollen. Over time his feet became harder to bear the hot sand of the desert, and with the help of wrapping his feet in rags and other pieces of carpet or wood, Abdul managed to keep going and kept breathing so one day he could return back to his home to see his family. Months turned into years, and about 5 years into being a slave he wandered off with the goats to a place in the desert, where he could hear the sounds of traffic. He knew the road was not that far from that location but he was unable to see it. So, Abdul started to mark the rocks and keep track of which turns he took to get there. His goats would wander off in a new direction every day, so he started to count his steps and used the sun as his guide. After a few times, when Abdul reached the same place, he now knew the direction and the time it would take him to get there. He had a bit more control over the goats now and was able to bring them back to the same spot more often. He became hopeful that he would be able to get out of there. Before he could escape, Abdul fell ill badly and had high temperature. He lost his strength and kept going in and out of consciousness. His kafil ordered one of his sons to take him out and shoot him. As his sons were carrying him away, one of the wives of the kafil came with a medicine and asked to try this medicine on Abdul to see if he might recover from it. The medicine was homemade in a bowl and was very bitter. Abdul had to drink it and then went to his bed. He managed to get some sleep and felt better in the morning. It took him a week to recover and gain his strength back. Abdul knew that he needs to build his strength back to be able to get out of there. He kept going back to the same location and kept listening to the traffic. Occasionally, he would hear a truck or car horn but unable to pinpoint the direction of the sound. He started to go further into the desert, and kept track of the way back, and as the evening arrived, he headed back. Abdul knew that during winter the days are mild and the nights are pleasant, and the only way out of here might be in the night time. He can track in the night to get to that spot, and maybe he can spot the lights of the cars and trucks. Abdul tried multiple times in the night to go out in the desert to understand his direction, and then decided that the best time to travel in the night is during full moon. Now 7 years have passed, and one night Abdul started to walk towards the spot where he could hear the traffic. Full moon helped him to see his path and he managed to reach the spot. As he got there, he could hear the noise of the traffic, but now he could also see a faint light behind the hills. Occasionally, the light will become brighter as the cars or trucks will use full beam to see in the dark stretch of desert. Abdul started to walk towards the light, and with every dune he crossed the lights became brighter until he crossed the final dune to see the road in the distance. Tears were flowing as he started to run towards his freedom. Soon the sun started to rise and the kafil woke up to find that Abdul was missing from his tent. He sent his sons to find him in the desert, and got into his 4x4 SUV to look for him. Abdul now was about 20 minutes away from the road and the sun was fairly high up the horizon. He knew that by now everyone will be looking for him and they can spot him from a distance. He kept looking back and didn't stop running towards the road. After he reached the road, he tried to wave the cars and trucks to help him, but no one stopped. Sometime people will slow down, but when they will see the condition of Abdul with long hair and beard they will suddenly speed up and leave. Abdul was getting exhausted, and when he turned around, he saw the 4x4 SUV heading out of the desert at speed. He knew this was his kafil's SUV, and he is coming back to capture him again. His short-lived freedom was going to turn back into the nightmare he has been living for the last 7 years. Abdul decided at that moment that he is prepared to die that day. His wife, family and friends didn't know he was even alive, and if he can't get out of this alive today, then he would rather be dead. His kafil saw him at a distance and suddenly turned the car towards him. He got out of the SUV and pointed his gun towards Abdul and told him to get into the car. Abdul shouted back at him and told him that he would not go back. Luckily the kafil was alone and knew that he would not be able to force Abdul into SUV. After a short time, he gave up and got into his SUV, and returned back. Realizing that he is finally free, Abdul sat down on the side of the road and kept crying and begged God to send him help. After some time, a Toyota pickup truck stopped and the driver, who was also a Saudi, waved to Abdul to hop in the back. He looked at Abdul's condition and asked him where he is heading, to which Abdul replied that he wants to go to the city. Abdul got into the back of the pickup truck, which was empty, and held on the rails. After about 2 hours of drive, they reached the city of Yombu, where this person was heading to. He asked Abdul where he wants to go, but Abdul didn't know anything in the city. Abdul told him about his situation, and this kind man took him to a police station where Abdul was able to get a translator, and explained that he has been kept as a slave for the last 7 years. After the police got the report written and filed, he was asked to wait so the police can arrange some accommodation for him. The driver of the pickup truck, whose name was Muhammad, offered Abdul to go with him to his house. With the help of Muhammad, police were able to pinpoint the location on the road where he has picked up Abdul. Police started the investigation and, in the meantime, Abdul got his hair and beard trimmed. Muhammad got him new clothes and provided him with accommodation until the police can sort out alternative solution for him. Near Muhammad's house there was a mosque named Abu Huraira Mosque. As Abdul's condition improved, he decided to go to the mosque. In the mosque there were multiple people, but mostly Arabic nationals. He spotted 2 Pakistani kids who were talking to their dad in Urdu. Abdul politely approached them and asked for a favor, that he is unable to read or write, so would he be so kind to write a letter for him. Abdul was quite pleased to meet the kids and their dad, whose name was Ali. Abdul mentioned that he doesn't need the letter urgently, so when Ali has some free time he can write it for him. Even though he was very desperate to get that letter drafted and sent off, but he didn't want to disturb the peace of this family. Ali invited Abdul to his house the next day and asked his wife to cook a nice meal. When Abdul arrived, they sat down and had a chat together, and then the food was served. Abdul enjoyed the traditional home-cooked Pakistani meal after 7 years. After the meal, Ali asked his kids to bring a pen and paper to write the letter. Abdul said that could Ali write, as it is what he is about to say. So, Abdul started with the first line by greeting his wife and said that he is alive and well. As soon as Abdul said, his tears started to roll down his eyes. He couldn't control his emotions. Ali got a bit shocked to hear what Abdul said and hugged him to comfort him. He asked his kids to leave the room and listen to Abdul's story. Ali wrote down a 4-page letter and provided his telephone number if Abdul's family would like to contact him. The reason Abdul couldn't contact his family over the phone because there was no phone connection in his village. The letter was drafted by Ali and posted. He provided his home postal address so Abdul's wife can write back to him. It took about 7 days for the letter to reach Abdul's home in Kashmir. Abdul's wife couldn't believe her eyes, as everyone around her told that Abdul must have passed away, and she should move on, but her father-in-law supported her, and waited to hear of any news from any resources they had. After Abdul left for Saudi Arabia, her wife gave birth to a baby boy who was now 6 years old and used to ask about his dad. He only knew his dad from few pictures in the house. Abdul's wife wanted to travel to the city and call the phone number on the letter, but it was a long journey, and cost of calling abroad was also expensive for her. She decided to write a letter back. On the other hand, Abdul was anxiously waiting to hear if there has been any phone call or letter back from his family, and he kept visiting the mosque every day as he might hear some news from Ali. One day the letter from Abdul's wife arrived. Ali asked his son to go immediately and look for Abdul at his residence, which was about 10 minutes away, to call him. Abdul arrived and was handed the letter sealed, which he asked Ali if he can read it for him. So Ali started to read the letter.
My dearest Abdul Rahim, I can hardly find the right words to express the happiness I feel as I read your letter. It tells me you're safe and free after 7 long years of hardship. There's news that fills my heart with both joy and longing. In your absence, our family has grown by one, a beautiful, curious, and spirited boy who carries your eyes and your laughter. He is your son, and he yearns to know the father who has been in his mother's stories. With every passing day, we eagerly await your return, so that you can hold him in your arms and witness the incredible bond that awaits you both. I've thought of you every day, imagining the time when we'd be together again. Our son Ibrahim has your eyes and your kind heart. He's been waiting to meet you, and I can't wait for him to feel your love. Our home hasn't been the same without you. It's like a puzzle missing its most important piece. But now, we're counting the days until you're here with us. You're the strongest person I know, and you've made a path to freedom for us. Every day, I dream about the moment you'll hold our son, and he'll finally meet his dad. Until then, always remember that we love you and are so proud of you. You're our hero, the one who lights our way in the dark. With all my love, Saima Rahim.
Ali read the letter for him and was about to fold it to give it back to him, but Abdul requested if he can read it one more time. Ali could tell from Abdul's face that he is struggling to hold his tears of happiness, so he read the letter one more time. Here Abdul's story would have completed and he would have returned back home, but there was a development from the police. They have located and arrested the kafil responsible for keeping Abdul as slave for 7 years. The matter went to court and the court looked at all evidence provided by Abdul and ordered kafil to pay the amount of 7 years of labor and compensation to Abdul. On the court order, Abdul was able to get all documents needed to transfer his work sponsorship to Muhammad, who helped him get out of the desert in his pickup truck, which eventually helped him to get his passport. In 1997, Abdul, filled with a sense of justice and newfound hope, booked his flight to Pakistan. He bid farewell to Muhammad and Ali, expressing his deepest gratitude for their unwavering support. He also thanked the police officers who had ensured that justice was served. As the plane descended into Pakistan, Abdul's heart pounded with anticipation. The moment he had yearned for over the past 7 years was finally here. He stepped off the plane and into the embrace of his homeland. Upon reaching his village in Kashmir, he was greeted by the sight of his wife, Saima, standing there with a young boy by her side. His son, Ibrahim. The family he had left behind and the family he was now returning to. Abdul rushed towards them, tears streaming down his face. He enveloped Saima and Ibrahim in a tight embrace, promising to never leave them again. His wife's eyes welled up with tears of joy as she introduced Ibrahim to his father. In the following days, Abdul shared his harrowing experiences with his family and villagers, who listened with bated breath. His story served as a stark reminder of the perils that lay beyond their peaceful village, but also as a testament to the indomitable human spirit. Abdul's life took on a new rhythm. He spent his days cherishing his freedom and making up for lost time with his family. He watched with pride as Ibrahim grew up to be a kind-hearted and resilient young man, much like his father. In 2023, Abdul would be in his late 60s, living a peaceful life surrounded by loved ones. His past experiences had taught him the true value of freedom and family. And though he carried the scars of his past, he wore them as badges of courage and resilience. And so, Abdul Rahim's story serves as a beacon of hope and resilience for all those who find themselves in the face of adversity. It is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of hope that can light up even the darkest paths.